Let us begin with a simple story about the global economy. Imagine two of the world's biggest shops, America and China. They've been trading with each other for many years. One day the owner of the American shop, then President Donald Trump, decided the Chinese shop was not playing fair. He believed China was selling its goods too cheaply. He believed China was engaging in practices that hurt American businesses. So, in 2018 he started what we now call a trade war. This was not a war with soldiers, nor was it a war with tanks. It was a war of economics fought with special taxes called tariffs. This conflict was significant because it involved the two largest economies on the planet. Their dispute sent ripples across the entire world. It affected all other countries and businesses that depended on their stability. So, what exactly is a tariff? Think of it as an extra fee or a tax on imported products. The US government placed these tariffs on billions of dollars of Chinese goods. That meant everything from electronics to furniture has become more expensive for American consumers and companies. The goal: make Chinese products less attractive, protect and create jobs, and encourage domestic manufacturing. When faced with these heavy American tariffs, China had a choice. It could have entered a full-blown head-to-head confrontation, escalating the conflict dramatically. Or it could find a smarter, more subtle way to respond. Beijing chose the latter. While it did impose retaliatory tariffs on American goods, its most effective strategy was to find a way around the barrier instead of fighting it head-on. China saw global trade as a web of routes and relationships. Rather than try to break down the US wall, it walked around it. Think of it as economic jujitsu, adaptation, not brute force. The aim: keep access to the American market without appearing to violate tariffs. If products weren't labeled made in China, they might avoid those taxes. That idea spawned a complex rerouting strategy. Parts of production moved to neighboring countries. Components were shipped out of China for final assembly in third countries. Vietnam, Malaysia. Mexico final assembly happened there, then the finished product shipped to the US, bypassing China-targeted tariffs. Asia's interconnected economies made this extremely effective. Let's look more closely at how this rerouting worked in practice. One of the most prominent examples was the role of Mexico. Chinese companies began shipping unassembled parts and raw materials across the Pacific to Mexican factories. These factories, often funded by Chinese investment, would then assemble the final products. Electronics, auto parts. Once assembled, these goods could be transported into the United States under the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Because the goods were technically made in Mexico, they were not subject to steep tariffs on Chinese products. This turned Mexico into a backdoor for Chinese goods. Another key player was ASEAN, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. China strategically deepened its economic ties with these nations. A furniture maker might ship components to Malaysia. There, the furniture would be assembled and finished and packaged before being sent to the US, labeled as originating from Malaysia. As US imports from China fell, imports from Vietnam and Mexico surged by almost the same amount. Now, let us turn our attention to India. As another Asian giant, India is often compared to China. However, its approach to trade and manufacturing has been different. For years, Make in India has aimed to boost domestic manufacturing. It also seeks to reduce reliance on imports, much like America's stated goal. This has often involved protecting industries with tariffs and other barriers, a strategy called protectionist. This inward focus makes integration into global supply chains harder. China has mastered those supply chains. India has not yet built the same ecosystem and logistics prowess. Infrastructure, while improving, still faces challenges. Ports are often congested, roads are less developed, moving goods from factory to ship can be slower and costlier than in China. That makes it harder to attract final assembly work that went to Vietnam and Malaysia. Global companies look for speed, efficiency, and reliability. China and its partners deliver those qualities. India's ties with neighbors are not as deeply integrated as China's with ASEAN. Groups like SAARC have not become powerful production blocs. Political tensions often block a truly integrated South Asian market. The primary lesson for India is simple but profound. In the 21st century economy, connectivity is strength. China did not just weather the storm of American tariffs, it thrived by leveraging deep ties with neighbors. It treated its supply chain not as a rigid line, but as a flexible web. Building domestic capacity is essential, but India must also build stronger bridges with neighbors in Southeast Asia and South Asia. Invest in regional infrastructure, harmonize trade rules, and foster partnerships. Work with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the ASEAN nations. Imagine Indian components moving seamlessly for final assembly before shipping to Europe and to the United States. Create a Made in South Asia brand with India as the natural leader. By building bridges instead of just walls,